Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Math 20-1, Chapter 3, Section 2, Solving Quadratic Equations. Before we get into solving quadratics, I want to quickly review Chapter 3.1, Factoring Quadratics. So if I gave you a quadratic like x squared plus 9x plus 20 and asked you to factor it, that's x plus something times x plus something. Now, last lesson, I showed you this box, how to solve, and I didn't properly thank Mr. Brill for that. Bless you. Makes life so much easier. You put your answer there. Now, what times what gives you x squared? Well, 1x times 1x. Now, what two numbers add together to be 9 and multiply together to be 20? Well, the factors of 20 are what? 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. So if I go plus 4 plus 5, so x times 5, 5x. X times 4 is 4x. Excuse me, x plus 4, x plus 5. Works for me. Now, this next one, 3x squared plus 5x minus 2, is the nasty one, but it's quite doable. So, here we've got to go 3x squared. What are the factors of 3x squared? Well, 3x and 1x. Then we have to go, what are the factors of minus 2? 1 minus 2, or minus 1 and 2 are the only two that pop to mind. No, we're not going to have fractions. Be quiet. So, guessing and checking. You have 4 choices for the numbers here. Now, I've done enough of these in my head that I can do, I'm going to try minus 1 and 2 here, because I can. 3 times 2 is 6x, minus 1x, and it works. Almost like, oh, I've been doing this forever, or at least before you were born. So I can solve these. Now, this comes out to be 3x minus 1 times x, 1x plus 2. Okay? And yeah, often you have to guess and check, and you have to do it more than once, which is why, if you remember in 3.1, I gave you extra of these rectangles to work with. Okay? Now, today's lesson, Chapter 3.2, Solving Quadratic Equations. Remember when I say solve, I get x equals something. So, looking at this 2x squared equals 30, we want to get x all by itself. Now remember BEDMAS, brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. That's the order you do things in. When you're simplifying an equation, you work backwards. So it is subtraction, addition, multiplication, division, exponents, and brackets last. So, easiest thing to do is divide by 2. X squared is 15. And then how do you get rid of a square? Square root both sides. And x is the square root of 15. And remember, leave it as the square root of 15, not 3 point something, or I will scream and throw things at you. More than normal. All right? Now, that's important, but that's more of tomorrow's lesson. Today's lesson is right here. X plus 5 times x minus 1 is 0. If I give you something like that, and yes, I will give you a homework question like this, solve this. Now, note here, you're multiplying two numbers and they equal 0. The only way they equal 0 is if one of the numbers, that is x plus 5 equals 0, or, I don't need brackets anymore because I'm not multiplying, x minus 1 equals 0. I don't know which one, so solve both. So x plus 5 is equal to 0. Subtract 5 from both sides. X equals minus 5. Or add 1 to both sides to get rid of the minus 1. X equals 1. So that's how we solve these. X equals minus x plus 5 is 0, or x equals minus 5. Or x minus 1 is 0, in which case x equals 1. That's solving a quadratic equation. Now you notice that's not exactly a quadratic equation, but that looks an awful lot like a FOILed quadratic equation. I'm going to be slightly nastier and ask you to solve something like this. Now, wherever we've seen 9x squared plus, x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0, where have we seen x squared plus 9x plus 20? Right back here. That's x plus 4 times x plus 5. Equals 0. And where have we seen 3x squared plus 5x minus 2? Right back here, 3x minus 1, x plus 2. Now the only thing new here is the equals 0 part. So all of a sudden, we have two-factored quadratic equations. And they look just like what we solved here. Now, can we solve these? Yes. I'll do the first one with you. X plus 4 is equal to 0. Minus 4, x equals minus 4. X plus 5 is equal to 0. Minus 5, x equals minus 5. So to solve this, x is minus 4 or x is minus 5. Both those numbers work. Plug them into the original equation. So go up here. Now, what is minus 4 squared? That's plus 16. 9 times minus 4 is minus 36. Plus 20. So what is 16 minus 36 plus 20? It equals 0. Plug in minus 5. Minus 5 squared is plus 25. 9 times minus 5 is minus 45. Plus 25 minus 45 plus 20 is 0. So both of these work. So that's what we do to solve. We factor it, and then we solve each of the factors. So 3x minus 1 is equal to 0. This one's a little sneaky. Add 1 to both sides. 3x equals 1. How do you get rid of times 3? Divide by 3. So x is 1/3. Now, I'm not going to do that in my head, but you can go back to that original quadratic and plug in 1/3, not 0.33, 1/3, and it will equal 0. Now the other factor here was x plus 2 is equal to 0. So I subtract 2 from both sides. X equals minus 2. Okay? So that's today's lesson. Take your quadratic, factor it, set it equal to 0, and solve. So the setting it equal to 0 and solve is the new part. So far, so good? Yes. Now, how am I going to be a pooh head? Well, hint, if it's not a standard quadratic equation, turn it into a standard quadratic equation and solve. So I'll help you with these. X squared plus 2x equals 35. How do you turn that into a standard quadratic? Well, you want it equal to 0. How do you turn 35 into 0? Subtract 35 from both sides. Okay? Now this other one here, 3x squared equals 10 minus 13x. You want it to equal 0. So how do you get rid of plus 10? Minus 10 from both sides, and add 13x. So, and someone will say, but Mr. Sutton, couldn't you subtract 3x squared from both sides? Yeah, you can. But then you've got a minus 3x squared, which I always found to be conceptually harder to solve. If the number in front of the x squared is positive, I find it easier. Now, I'm going to pause the recording here. I want you guys to factor both of these, and then we'll come back and compare answers, okay? Okay, so this first one here, x squared 2x minus 35, x. I think it's plus 7 minus 5 minus 5x plus 7s. x plus 7, x minus 5 is equal to 0, plus 7 is equal to 0, x minus 5 is equal to 0. Add 5, x equals 5, minus 7 equals minus 7. All right, so I'll check one of them and check the original equation just in case you made a math boo-boo, because poop happens. 5 squared is 25, plus 10 is 35, yes. Minus 7 squared is 49, minus 14 is 30, yes, they both work. Now, the second one is a pain in the bum. So, 3x squared, 13x minus 10. Now, 3x squared has to be 3x and 1x. No, it's not going to be a half x and 6x. All right, now the factors are minus 10, 1 and 10, 2 and 5, so that could be minus 1, 10, 1 minus 10, 2 minus 5 minus 2 comma 5. Crap. 8 options. Think. Well, we're getting 13 plus 13x, which tells me the larger number is probably positive. Since it's 13, well, 3 times 10 is 30, so I don't think it's a 10. So I'm going to go plus 5 here, give me 15x, minus 2 here, gives me minus 2. Yes, that works. So this is 3x minus 2 times x plus 5 equals 0. So 3x minus 2 is 0. X plus 5 is equal to 0. Plus 2, 3x equals 2. Divide by 3, x is 2/3. And minus 5, x equals minus 5. Okay? So, if it's not a quadratic, turn it into a standard quadratic and solve. Now, those are kind of easy. How am I going to be slightly a poo head? Well, something like this. Now, note the first one here. Bracket x plus 3 times bracket x plus 3 close bracket x minus 3 close bracket equals 1 minus 3x. So many of you will go x plus 3 is equal to 0, x equals... No, don't do this. Don't do that. This one is evil. You have to FOIL it out. And then put everything on one side. So, x squared minus 3x plus 3x minus 9. As I said, put everything on one side. So minus 1 plus 3x equals 0. Put everything on one side. Minus 3x plus 3x. Okay, actually, no. My apologies. Let me show you. Did too many steps at once. Equals 1 minus 3x. Let's leave it like that. Let's just FOIL one side. My apologies. So what have we got here? This is x squared minus 9 equals 1 minus 3x. Now, as I said, you've got to get everything on one side. So minus 1 from both sides and add 3x. X squared plus 3x minus 10 is 0. So, can we factor that? Yes. I'll leave you guys to factor and solve that. Let's look at this other one. How do we get rid of a square radical? Square. Now, remember from chapter 2, the radical should be by itself. And please tell me you're going x plus 3 times x plus 3 equals minus 7 minus 2x. X squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9 equals minus 7x. Now, how do I get rid of minus 7? Add 7 to both sides. How do I get rid of minus 2x? Add 2x to both sides. So this becomes x squared plus 8x plus 16 is 0. All right? Now, I'll want you guys to pause the tape. Pause the recording. Look at this, factor, and solve. All right? Pause. All right, welcome back. So, x squared 3x minus 10 x factors of 10 plus 5 minus 2. Minus 2x, 5, yes. X plus 5, x minus 2. So x plus 5 is equal to 0, x minus 2 is equal to 0. Minus 5, x equals minus 5. Plus 2, x equals 2. Now I'm going through this quickly, but I told you to do it. We're just checking work here. And the other one, x and x plus 4. So this is x plus 4 times x plus 4 is equal to 0. So as one solution, x equals minus 4. Okay? So, trick here is not going to look like a standard quadratic. How can I be a prue head? Here's a couple non-standard quadratics. How do we solve these? All right. Well, what's the difference? Well, first things first, this is not a quadratic and it doesn't equal 0. So, and we cannot have a polynomial divided by x. So how do we get rid of divide by x? Multiply both sides by x. If we do that, observe this is x squared minus 3x equals 40. Now, does that look like a standard quadratic? No, but what do we do? Add 40 to both sides. Squared minus 3x minus 40 is 0, and that we can factor and solve. So, for this other example, I will in a moment ask you to pause the recording, factor and solve the x squared minus 3x minus 40. But I do want to go on and do this other one. How do I turn this into a quadratic? Well, I cannot have a divide by x squared, so I multiply both sides, and notice, as long as I multiply both sides by the same thing, I'm not changing the equation. 3x squared plus x minus 10 is equal to 0. Now, here you have two quadratic equations. Pause the recording, factor solve. Come back and check your work. All right, welcome back. Here, 3x squared, x squared minus 3x minus 40. X squared minus 3x minus 40. X factors of 40 minus 8 plus 5. This is 5x minus 8x. X minus 8. X plus 5. Yes, there are advantages to being old. I've been doing this since before you were born. I can go, what are the factors of minus 40? They add together to be minus 3. Well, what's the difference between 8 and 5? So this is x minus 8 is 0, plus 8 to both sides. X equals 8. X plus 5 is equal to 0, minus 5 on both sides. X equals minus 5. All right. The other one here, 3x squared. Let's see. 3x squared, x minus 10. Factors of 3x squared are 3x and x. Now, what are the factors of minus 10? 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Since they... x plus 2, 3x minus 5. Minus 5x, 6. Yes. So I had to think about that one for a minute. And yes, the reason I asked you to pause the tape and try it is it's going to take more than one. I had to stop and think about that one. I had to do 2 or 3 of them in my head before I found one that worked. But I've been doing this often long enough that I can do it in my head. I do not want you guys doing it in your head. I want you showing work. X plus 2 is equal to 0. So, sorry, equals 0, my bad. So how do I get rid of minus 5? Add 5 to both sides. 3x equals 5. Divide both sides by 3. X is 5/3. Leave it as 5/3 rather than 1.66 repeating because somebody will drop the 0.6 repeating and it just becomes 1.6 or something. It annoys the hell out of me. X plus 2 minus 2 minus 2 x equals minus 2. So there we go. X is 5/3 and x is minus 2. All right? So that's solving quadratics. I'm going to give you something. I will start off by something by a nice quadratic, and then I'm going to give you something that's not, and you have to turn it into a quadratic. Okay? Having problems, watch the tape again, or come see me in class. Otherwise, good luck. Do you check your understanding?